Hello everybody and welcome! This has been a very exciting week for space fans, especially if you're keeping an eye on what SpaceX is doing down in Boca Chica, Texas, where they are building one of the new Starship prototypes. Yes, they have finished stacking the thing, and by that I mean that they have joined the main hull with the nose cone, and I was there live sort of via the live stream of Lab Padre. Thanks again to him for providing 24/7 coverage of that facility, so you should definitely check his channel out. And what we've seen was quite a feat of engineering, because mainly one giant crane put that nose cone on top of the main hull. And yeah, it was a little bit weird seeing like hands protruding from between the cracks between both parts of the rocket. So we were a little bit worried about those people, but in the end apparently they survived, or if not, they are still enclosed in that Starship. So yeah, sacrifices for the space god? I don't know. Anyhow, if you know me, then you know that I like to rebuild these types of things in Kerbal Space Program, and boom, this is it. This is my full-scale Starship recreation of SpaceX's prototype. Yeah, as Elon Musk himself said on Twitter, these wing shape type things on the side that are used to slow the thing down during descent, or during aerobraking rather, when re-entering the atmosphere, these are going to be tucked into the sides while riding Super Heavy, the large booster down below, to space, because, well, otherwise aerodynamics will go all wonky and we don't want that. Yeah, not everything went according to plan, and, well, Elon himself said they want to use Starship basically as the launch escape system itself, because it has enough thrust-to-weight ratio and you can escape that fireball. As you can see, Kerbal Space Program proves that you can. Well, if you don't take the wonky landing gear into account. Again! After rising into the atmosphere for a few thousand meters, then of course the booster would separate and Starship will go on its own. While already trying to land the booster, I noticed some weird aerodynamic things going on, and yeah, the booster did not land at all, because I lost complete control of the thing. So yeah, not such a good omen for the main ship. Well, it made orbit without any problem, and since I'm a sucker for details, if you remember one of the presentations back in, I think 2018, so 2017 even, well, they thought about adding a docking port on the aft section of the thing, so yeah, I did the same here, and thanks to the new robotic parts in Kerbal Space Program Breaking Ground DLC, well, that's a mouthful to pronounce, I have put that on a piston that would extend and then retract to make space. Okay, when trying to try out that wing aerobrake approach thing, well, this did not work as I liked. I mean, it looks cool, and I put on action groups with these KAL controllers how I wanted the wings to be in which position. But yeah, I mentioned the aerodynamic problems I had with the booster. Well, same thing here. And mainly I discovered, well, there are two culprits for that. One, the structural panels in the aft section of the ship that look great and make for a nice big 9-meter skirt for that 50-meter Starship. Yes, it is 50 meters, well, almost 50 meters tall. And together with the Super Heavy booster, even in Kerbal Space Program, it's 110 meters tall. Yep, that's a full-scale replica. But it did not work because of aerodynamics. Well, the panels were one culprit, and the second culprit was the fairing. If you look here closely, you see a long blue spike and a long red spike going away from the fairing base. Well, that means that the aerodynamic forces are only calculated, in the game apparently, from the fairing base, no matter how large your fairing is. So yeah, no chance that this could work. I even tried to remediate this with including header tanks similar to the real Starship prototype. So I included empty tanks in the front of the ship and then pumped fuel up there to make it maybe a little bit more stable, but that did not work either. Again. Well, okay, so then I reverted to one of my early things that I used, which is this here, and this worked a lot better. If you can see here, I'm controlling the pitch with the front and aft winglets, and depending on which are sort of pointing into the wind, the ship goes up or down. So yeah, this works as advertised, basically. And speaking of advertised, of course, Elon Musk had his big presentation, which had to be postponed because of bad weather, and that led immediately to speculation that they wanted to launch the ship. Well, here's what really happened. Basically, Elon Musk came out and just held a presentation in front of the massive Starship. They also had one of the first Falcon 1 boosters side by side to the Starship, and the size difference was enormous. Elon once again reiterated his vision of a spacefaring humanity going interplanetary and having rocket ships or having Starship usage similar to how we use airplanes nowadays, meaning landing and flying them multiple times a day. He was even quoted. He was even heard saying during the Q&A that they could be able to fly the booster 20 times a day. That's the super heavy booster, and fly starships 4 times a day each. So that's an interesting future to look forward to. Speaking of the near future, they are really ramping up production. They want to build the Mark III and Mark IV Starship in about 1 or 2 months. Mark I is now finished at Boca Chica and Mark II is being built in Florida. And they want to be able to go to orbit with the Mark V, which Elon estimated to be in about half a year. Yeah, of course we have to take this with a grain of salt because it's Elon time, of course, but imagine that if they manage to reach orbit with a Mark V Starship in, let's say not half a year, but a year from now, that would be 3/4 of the year 2020. Another interesting thing is that they are going to change or improve on the design and manufacturing process, he said, exponentially. So the Mark III is already going to be built a little bit different than the other ones. He talked about making these ring segments that the main hull is made of, not of cobbled together segments for the ring, but make them of one singular stainless steel piece and kind of fold them into the tank shape. So this is going to get interesting. He also said this will enable them to make the hull thinner than they did with the Mark I and Mark II, which is going to lower costs as well. So this is going to be interesting how the Mark III, IV and V starships are going to look like. Well, I'm pretty sure they won't look as cobbled together as the Mark I, but will be magnificent to behold as well. Speaking of the Mark I, this exact ship that Elon was standing in front of is going to fly up to 20 kilometers up into the atmosphere and then land back at the facility. And it's going to do that at the exact spot where the Starhopper initially took flight for the first time. And if I understood it correctly, the Mark I Starship would also try to perform this belly flop maneuver that we've been talking about for the past few weeks and months, where they are using those wings to have some sort of controlled fall, and then only at the last moment or very close to the surface they are going to activate the thrusters and the engines and orient it in a vertical position and then land on the spot. So this is going to be exciting to watch, and yeah, depends on what the FAA has to say about that. If you remember the Starhopper tests, those were delayed due to FAA approval maneuvers, so to speak, but Elon said that the FAA is very forward-thinking, that was his quote, and he looks forward to working with them together for the next Starship tests. Speaking of Starship, He put up some more graphics up there, which were wrong because they stated that Starship is going to weigh 85 tons dry, but in fact it's going to be 120 tons. He also talked in length about the heat shield, which is going to be added on top of the stainless steel hull. But since stainless steel is already capable of absorbing a lot of heat, the additional heat shield, which I think is going to be made partly out of glass or something, is going to be a lot thinner than it would have been if they had used aluminum or carbon fiber or any other composite material. He also said that the steel construction is a lot cheaper. He said it's only 2% of the cost for the same amount of carbon fiber they would have needed to build the Starship Mark 1. A bit more news were also given in regards to the Super Heavy booster. We're not going to see one of those until Mark 3 or Mark 4 of the Starship has been built, because the main constraint, the bottleneck, is the Raptor engine production. We were shown some nice interesting test stand footage of the Raptor firing, and Elon said that they are going to probably need 100 Raptor engines from now until the first orbital flight of Starship. So they're going to have to test a few boosters, they're going to have to test a few Starships and add all those engines up, and yeah, he came to about 100, because Super Heavy, the booster, is going to sport up to 37 Raptor engines, with the center 7 ones always gimbaling and the other ones fixed. And only the center 7 ones will be used to return to the launch pad. Now, the upgraded booster, or the update design to the booster, notes it at 68 meters long, which increases the entire Starship Super Heavy stack to 118 meters and will have a lift of mass of 5,000 tons. That's insane, and I really hope I'll be able to see one of those live once in my lifetime at least. Doing this presentation on September 28th had a significance for SpaceX and Elon Musk, because 11 years ago to that date, SpaceX made orbit for the first time with their Falcon 1 rocket. If you don't already know, if they hadn't managed to do that, then this would have been it for SpaceX, because it was their last attempt, they were out of money, and if they hadn't succeeded with their fourth launch, which was the fourth launch for Falcon 1, then the company would have gone bust. But it didn't, and now we had the Falcon 9, we had the Falcon Heavy, and we're now going to see Starship fly in 1 or 2 months, Elon time, and hit 20 kilometers and then land back at Boca Chica. If we understand Elon correctly, then Boca Chica is going to become a massive space hub for the United States, because he is planning to increase his facilities over there. He even mentioned something like making buyout offers for the village, so he wants to buy more real estate and basically turn this entire landscape over there into a giant spaceport. The only reason why he hadn't done that yet was because he said buildings are slower to build than spaceships, so he focused on the spaceships, which is a priority that I can get behind. Alright, so these are all the newest updates in regards to Starship, Super Heavy, SpaceX, and so on, and my Kerbal Space Program interpretation for that. If you want to try that out yourself, I put a download link in the description. And if you have enjoyed this video, please share it with your friends and give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.